The world says that there is no godly men or women left. So if you're a Christian, you should just give up because they don't exist. Well, the wisest man alive, Solomon, had something else to say about this, because if you don't think they were saying that exact same thing in this time, you're wrong. So he confronts this a lot. And this is what we're going to be talking about. So buckle up, buddy, girl, because we are in for a ride. Solomon said, the problem isn't that godly people don't exist. It's that people stop valuing the characteristics of a godly person and they start chasing what looks good. And that is so true then as it is now. And if you haven't seen my previous video, what we talked about, go watch that, because that is full. That's Proverbs 5. It is very good. It is full of wisdom about relationships. Thousands of years ago, Solomon warned us about hookup culture before hookup culture existed. So what does the wisest man in the Bible say? What should we be looking for in a godly relationship, in a godly spouse to pursue, to date, to marry? First of all, he said character matters more than chemistry, and that beauty without character is dangerous. Proverbs 11:22, which he wrote, like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman without discretion. In modern language, a beautiful face cannot make up for lack of wisdom, integrity, self-control, or a godly character. Solomon repeatedly tells us that who someone is matters way more than how they make you feel. And that basically leads us into our next point of Proverbs 7:21. Don't ignore red flags because someone is attractive. Where are we? With much seductive speech, she persuades him. With her smooth talk, she compels him. All at once, he follows her as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as a stag is caught fast, till an arrow pierces its liver, as a bird rushes into a snare. He does not know that it will cost him his life. Solomon is telling us that people can be charismatic and charming and make you feel all of the things and lead you to your own destruction. That is still true today. Not everyone pursuing you has good intentions, and I would guess that a lot of them don't. That is why wisdom and discernment is so important. So we've seen a lot of talk and warnings. So what does a godly relationship look like? What is it built on? I'm so glad you asked. We have a book here that's going to tell us, so we don't have to keep wondering. I love these verses too. They are beautiful and sensual. Proverbs 5:18-19. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth, a lovely deer, a graceful doe. That doesn't mean he's actually comparing her to that animal. In that time, it meant the characteristics and the slender beauty, strength, gracefulness, all these things that came with it. Let her breast fill you at all times with delight, being intoxicated always in her love. But we're going to go back to that first part where it says, let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth. I think we should notice that Solomon does not tell, he's talking to men, but this applies to men and women. He's not saying chase the next best thing that looks good. He doesn't say keep searching for someone better because eventually you'll find them. Opposite of that, actually. He says, rejoice in your spouse. Enjoy the things God gave you. Remain faithful. In the world, which is the opposite, they don't care about the death and destruction and everything else that follows. So they just want the hookup culture and the next best thing. And Solomon, the wisest man alive, with God-given wisdom, tells us to remain faithful and enjoy what we are given. So now that we got that cleared, what should we be looking for in a relationship, in a godly relationship? What does that look like? What character should we focus on, right? I think the first thing that he tells us is one of the best things, and that is, does this person draw you closer to God? Because a godly relationship should draw you closer to God, in the heart of God, and not further away. When Solomon is writing this, he has one wife, and he is speaking from experience. But later, he ends up marrying multiple wives to, further his kingdom and all these different things. And guess what happens? It does not end well. And it says in 1 Kings 11, they turned his heart away from God. And that is when the downfall happens. That is when destruction happens. That's when all his blessings that God has given him start going down the toilet, and he just wastes them and throws them away. So he ends up speaking from experience on the other side of things, of letting someone of the opposite sex lead you away and into their worship, that whatever that looks like. His life literally became a living testimony of how it works both ways when you're just with someone that God has given you and when you try the others. So if you're curious how that works, just look at the wisest man in the Bible who ended up not following his own advice. But remember, there is nobody perfect in the Bible but Jesus, because we're all human and we're all flawed. So that's what I love about the Bible. It is so honest as it can get. So that way we get to learn from them. So the next thing is, what do we need to do for ourselves to prepare for a godly relationship? Because if you're going out in the clubs, how do you expect to find a godly woman, a godly man there when you have a higher standard, but you're not living up to that standard? So the first thing that Solomon tells us is self-control is so important. And more than that, self-control is attractive. It is attractive. It is such a good quality. So Proverbs 25 verse 28, a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. Who would want to live in that city? Not me. So before you are looking for a godly spouse, you are to become a godly person. And that just means that you are trying to follow Christ's example in his heart. So just like Solomon asked, I'm going to ask you, and you should ask yourself, can you control your words? Can you control your desires? Your anger, because Solomon teaches us that character is built through self-government. So right now you're probably thinking, well, that's really hard. Yeah, it's not easy, but guess what you get out of it? Proverbs 19:14 says, house and wealth are inherited from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. That word prudent means wise, discerning, thoughtful, sensible. Solomon says a wise spouse is a gift from God, not just a lucky trinket, not merely chemistry, but a blessing. And that principle we see throughout the book of Proverbs, comparing a godly wife to gold and rubies and silver and all these precious things. And that principle applies to both men and women. A godly spouse is worth far more than just the worldly success. But it also includes blessing from God, which we know from the Bible. There were a lot of godly people, Abraham, David, so on, and the women that supported Jesus' ministry that were blessed by God with wealth. So, and lastly, I think I need to uncross my legs because I've been sitting in that position for so long, that the thought that nobody has values anymore. People have been saying some version of that for thousands of years. Yet throughout scripture, we see the opposite, and we see that God's faithful people are always the ones that are preserved. I'm thinking of Ruth and Boaz. She wasn't even Jew. She was outside of it. Joseph and Mary. The culture around them wasn't perfect either. They were doing things to Baal, sacrificing to Baal, horrible things around them, and yet faithful people still existed. The danger is becoming so cynical that you stop believing God can bring faithful people into your life. So to sum that all up, the world says, find someone exciting. That only is their criteria, or attractive. And Solomon says, find someone wise and with a good character. The world says, replace people when you're bored and follow your feelings. Solomon says, rejoice in your husband or wife of your youth. And history proved Solomon was right, because when he ignored his own wisdom, it nearly destroyed him. And when he actually listened to it, he was